To start out with, it's a Shirley platform trailer, two-file trailer. So the way that we describe the trailers is a lot of these trailers are splittable. So you can order them in halves, right? So I can make this, like if it was splittable, this trailer, this would be one file, and this would be one file. So right now it's a two-file trailer, but these trailers are not splittable, so that's just what they are. Generally, the difference between a conventional trailer and a platform trailer is a platform trailer has two systems. It has hydraulic suspension and hydraulic steering. A conventional trailer does not have hydraulic steering. It's usually, well, unless you're running a dolly at the back, but this trailer, the main thing about it that's beneficial to what we do in heavy haul is axle loading. You can carry a lot more payload and spread the weight evenly over the whole length of the trailer. Where, like, say for instance, you're loading a 64 wheeler, where do you put that piece? So you might have to move it 3 or 4 times to get it, and then scale it, and then you might be out 2,000 or 3,000 kgs on a group or an axle. Where a platform trailer, it's very easy to be really accurate on where your axle loading is, just by gauges, by hydraulic gauges. That's one of the big advantages of it, is that hydraulic suspension. So what happens is each one of these cylinders, there's going to be one on each wheel set. If they're plumbed together, and the load is in the center of the trailer, every one of those cylinders will have the same load on it, and they'll always be equal like that. It'll never, like, I mean, you will get some variation when you get like rough terrain or something like that. You might load one side or the back or the front, but it'll always come back to normal on level ground. So
if you had it shimmed properly too, right?
Yes, yeah. So like with these, you call it pre-cambering. So there's programs where like I just do it by experience, but normally you'd run a program called Easy Load, and it'll show you how much shim to put in each joint. Like, you let the program know how many joints you have in your trailer, like how many shim joints. It'll tell you how many millimeters of shim to put in for this particular load, and you put the load dimensions in, and it'll tell you. Also, like in the manual, it'll show you like your center of gravity of the tipping angle and things like that with any particular load. Like, you just give the dimensions, it'll tell you how many degrees you can be off before you get over center and the trailer's unstable. Your suspension, like I was saying, it's split. So the way the trailers are right now is split like that. So the way that the trailers work is you have to split the trailers into zones. So, like, for instance, this would be zone 1, 2, and 3. And what the advantage of that is a 3-legged stool on uneven ground will almost always find a spot where it's stable. Where a 4-legged stool, you'll never be stable on uneven ground. It'll always load one corner opposite. Same as if the trailer was split in 4. On flat ground, it's great. But on uneven ground, you're going to load one side and one side, or one side and one side. Always opposite, diagonal. You'll never load just one side like that. So what we call a static load would be a 3-file, or sorry, three zones, like that. And so that's your 3-legged stool, essentially. So, and this is what I call, or what's called, your stability triangle. So what you want to do is you overlay this triangle here over the trailer. That's where you want the center of the load. Make sense? So that's your 3-legged stool. So here's your side support. So these two these two halves of the trailer are your side support, and this is just your end-to-end support. So it's sloshed. So this is where your three-legged stool kind of comes into play.
And you accomplish that with valving.
With the valving, yeah.
So that our trailers you could go with 4.
Yep, just one valve. The most important valve in the trailer.
And you want your that front portion now? It doesn't matter which you have front or back, but which
Nope.
preferably did you say that you want?
I prefer myself. I like to have the single point in the rear, but I mean it really doesn't matter. It's really preference. For the stuff that we're doing, like you might maybe see 300,000, 350 for what we're doing, but I don't think anything bigger than that. For like unless you get into double wide, then you're up around the 600,000, 700,000 pounds, and then.
Okay, so
But then I'd run like a 4-point with something like normally with a big trailer like that. It really well it's load dependent really honestly, but you were saying.
no, go ahead.
So yeah, like he was saying, you could run your single point back here, and there your stability triangle would be just like that, right? And you can run a 4-point. The only difference, like I said, is a 4-legged stool. So on flat ground, it's more stable. So a high center of gravity, you're going slow on sight with something really gross and ugly. Sure, that's better, because then you don't get that slosh. It's rigid. It's way rigid.
As long as it's flat.
As
ground,
long,
I'd say.
as long like within reason, you know.
Yeah.
Like I've used it a few times, like a couple dozen times probably, for something that's really high, really heavy. Center of gravity is like 30 feet in the air. Like you don't want that tipping, right? Where the trailers are way more rigid than if you have that slosh. Your trailer would be split like so, right? The only problem is that you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna load up opposite corners. So you got to really be careful, like really watch the trailer. You might have to level it as you go, kind of thing. Like heavy transformers are like that.
So if you were hauling something out of Calgary, say, would you run it at 4-point down the highway until you got to site, maybe, and switch it to 3?
No, I'd run at 3, then 4.
You run it 3 down the highway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then maybe switch it to 4, or maybe.
maybe. It's really load dependent and terrain.
Because you can adjust it as you go with your remote, right?
No, you can't adjust your the suspension with the remote.
Oh.
No,
So
just your steering. Just steering. Yeah, on SPMTs and stuff you can, but you have a remote, like a big remote, and you're doing everything all at once.
So you prefer to tow it down the highway in 3-point,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you left the highway, would you leave it in 3 to go down before you got to lease, kind of, depending on the train?
It depends on the train. I very rarely will switch it.
Very rarely you switch it?
Yeah.
So 3 parts usually
The preferable.
Okay.
Yeah, like 99% of the time it's 3-point. If I'm doing something on site, like say I'm doing a site move, and there's like a big tall module with like a big exchanger in the top of it, 4-point.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going like a kilometer down there, and it's gross and ugly looking, 4-point. And then I'm leveling it as we're walking. I'll walk with it.
Right, okay, that's.
So it's like first and first kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So that's when you stand on the back to do leveling.
Yeah, yeah. And then like you get into something where your center of gravity is really high and you're on the highway, and you run a leveling cab. Like you're actually sitting in the cab on the trailer leveling it as you go, with like a water level, and
Yeah, right, the water.
yeah,
Okay.
that's for like the really, really tall shit and heavy. So each one of these modules has valving all the way down each side, and that enables you to switch from to control your oil flow. So I can send oil across the trailer, so this would be floating. I could send oil across the trailer here, so it's floating. I can split it, the suspension, wherever I want to within reason. Spacer decks make it a little harder because there's no valving there, so you have to pull a line off. Instead of closing a valve, you pull a line off, so now the oil can't travel. Does that make sense? We're jumping around a little bit, but on each wheel set, there's a hydraulic valve right there that goes into the wheel set and the cylinder. So this valve on Goldhofer is a 6 valve. On a Shirley, it's a 7 valve. It actually has a plunger inside the valve if it senses a pressure loss. So on either side. So it's got the soft hose that goes into the cylinder, and it's got the hard line on the trailer on each side of the valve. So if the hard line blows, it'll shut off that direction. If the soft line blows to the wheel set, it'll shut off the other way, right? If they're properly maintained. If they're not, sometimes they don't work. And then it just shoots oil out, and the thing starts doing one of those. So it's happened a couple of times. But usually that's usually a maintenance problem. Guys not lubing their valving and stuff like that. Like they're very labor intensive as far as maintenance goes. A lot of like lubrication and moving the valving over like once a week, once every couple weeks, move every valve. Then like open close it. Yeah. Because it stuff sits for a long time, and then it gets, you know what it gets like. Oh, that's another thing too. When you're splitting your suspension. You want that 3-legged stool for the stability. So you always want to make sure your zones are equal, the amount of cylinders to support the load. So like a 12 line, it's divisible by 3, the amount of cylinders. There's 24 cylinders, so you want 8 cylinders here, 8 cylinders there, and 8 there for support. So now it's fully equal. It's a 3-legged stool. Totally, it's a static load, or a static system, sorry. So let's say you have an 8-line though. You can't split it, it's not divisible. So an 8-line will have 8 times 16 cylinders, right? So it's not divisible by 3. So what you'll do is you split that 8-line, 3 axle? No, 2 axle. So then you're only gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4 in your slosh, and you'd have 6 per side. You always want more side support. If it's not equal, you want more side support than slosh.
That'd be a pretty stable load.
Yeah, they are.
So you got,
But it's not gonna. It's gonna be way more rigid
Right,
than like a normal, like a 12. It's gonna give you that little bit of a give.
right, but you shouldn't get to where you're corner to corner.
No.
so on the one on the right you drew there, you'd have 4 cylinders in the front and 6 cylinders on each side.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep. That would be for an 8-line.
Yeah.
This would be 12-line. So a 10, you'd split it at the 3rd axle. So then you'd have 6 and 7 for a 10-line. You'd have six in your slosh and 7 per side for a 10-line. And sometimes it's always better to just have the side support than the slosh for sure.
You say that again, you wanted
more sides.
You always want the more
cylinders
side.
in the sides.
You always, if it's not equal, you want it equal if possible,
Right.
right?
If you can't have them more in the side.
Yeah. And that split shouldn't affect where you put that load on the trailer.
So your center of gravity triangle is kind of the same.
It should still be in the center of the trailer.
Okay.
Right? Because the trailer it's still that bridge that's sending the weight to the ends.
Right.
Right? So it shouldn't matter where that split is. Your zones will still be close to the same. So actually I'll go into the accumulators. So suspension. Just for illustration purposes, I'll just do a 6-line here. So those are your cylinders. So each one of these has 2 tires, right, and 1 cylinder. So on each side, they'll have a valve and a little pot. And that little pot is this hydraulic accumulator, nitrogen accumulator actually. And what they are is a shock absorber. And all it does is, because the trailers are so rigid, that they'll just hammer everything as you're going down the road, especially if you're on potholes and rough terrain or whatever. It just hammers. So what that does is just gives you a little bit of a cushion, right? Just so you're not destroying the trailer essentially, because the trailers are so rigid. What'll happen though is with time, these just fail. So, but I mean, you can't do anything about it. But one thing about these as well, if you're operating the trailer, they're all open or they're all closed. They worked as one system. So you can't just have, like there's extra ones here, like say on a 12 or something, there'll be extra ones. They all have to be open.
Even though there's no wheel set.
Even though there's no wheel set, you still have to open it. It's one whole system.
Right.
So
So-
if one accumulator fails, does it rely on the other?
The others will send oil to it. Like it's for the whole system. That's why it works. At least at least as far as I know. Like
You could have one or two that have failed and still
Yeah.
get the action.
yeah, you'll still get a little bit of that cushioning. Yeah. The only time you would close those valves, in my experience, is if you're doing something real heavy, like over 100, say 120 bar. So, because what'll happen is, like, say you have a tall building.
You're talking pressure gauge at 120.
Yeah, yeah. So let's say you have a building. What'll happen is with those accumulators open, it's able to lean more. It's got more give, right?
Yeah.
So going around like a speed corner or something like that, you might see that thing lay right over.
That'd make you sick.
It does. It does when you break, oops, I forgot to close those. And you're like, okay, just get through the corner. Okay, stop now. Okay, stop now. I just got to check the trailer quick. But yeah, it'll actually let it lean like 2 or 3 feet sometimes more than if they're closed. If they're closed, it's more rigid. It won't do that. It'll be, you won't even see it barely at all, comparatively. So maximum axle loading for these trailers is 34 metric ton per group of 2, like a 16-wheel group. It's 34 metric ton. That's a brand new trailer that's maintained. So I mean, from there you derate it for, you know what I mean? Like I would like for these trailers, I could put 500,000 on them comfortably, and not feel like I was we're gonna blow something.
On one of our 12 lines.
Yeah.
If I was out.
Yeah, because you're looking like once you start looking at failure points, and you're looking like some of those hoses on that trailer are 20 years old,
Yeah.
right? And Shirley says every hose has to be replaced every 5 years, which is
You write that down.
So,
it's pretty ridiculous to think
so
about
if
that.
you blow a line,
Mhm.
it has portion valves in there that doesn't dump it, right?
Yeah, so like I was saying with that wheel set, it's got a valve right on the top where there's a soft line that goes into the cylinder, the wheel cylinder, lift cylinder actually. So there's a block there,
Yeah.
and there's a hard line that goes into that block that comes off the trailer. So that is what prevents the trailer from going over essentially. But sometimes, like I said, sometimes they fail.
Yeah.
So, and it's almost always this line here that blows. It's very rare. I've only saw it twice where the hard line will blow, and that's just old stuff.
Yeah.
Like one of Mammoot's old Shirleys from like 1980. So that there's a hard line, and then there was no way to stop it, except dump the whole trailer right down to the ground.
So if it fails on that side of the block, you dump the whole trailer. It's
Yeah.
just gonna be pumping oil.
Yeah, which I've had to do once. Yeah, mine was actually a Faymanville trailer, which is a lot like a Goldhofer Shirley hybrid, and instead of they use a different way of plumbing the trailer. Instead of hard lines, like those bent hard lines, they're all like bent purposely for that specific spot. Faymanville, to save money, put a bunch of fittings and stuff in there to like short little lines, so they didn't have to do all the bending. Well, those fittings they backed off. And so my load, I actually have a video of it. It was a really tall, skinny building, and it did one of these. And I had to dump the trailer before I lost the load. I did, yeah. Just.
So you dump the trailer right at the back end.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so what happened was like that. The load was like this. one of the failure point was on this side, and it was on a hard line in between the sections, like in between the wheel sets. So there was nothing, there was no fail safe to close the valve. There's nothing to close. So, and the fitting backed off, and I'm looking at the load, and then everything looks fine. I'm looking at the rumble strips, and they're wet. And I'm thinking, well, it must have just rained or something. And then I see the load starting to go over, and I'm like, oh, it's hydraulic oil. So yeah, but I caught it just in time, which was, so we'll get back to that pre-cambering. So from the side here, so every one of the modules and spacer decks will have a pin joint, and that's where you shim the trailer. So you'd add shim in for whatever load you're hauling, right? So say I'm hauling something like this, like say a little building that's really heavy, well, I'm gonna need a whole bunch of shim in there. The trailer's gonna have to look like that. So pre-camber, right? And the way the trailers work is that that load gets dispersed this way, like a bridge. So theoretically, when you load a trailer, you want it to be perfectly flat, loaded. Empty doesn't matter so much, other than you really want to watch your axle stroke and stuff like that. But so something like this, I would have it like a rainbow almost. Something like, say that's 250,000 pounds and it's only 40 feet long. So, but if you had something that was 100 feet long, you'd use way less shim.
Okay, so if you were heading down to Calgary and you would want to shim on location,
For something like that, yeah.
you wouldn't shim it here and
No.
drive to Calgary.
Compressor or something, you're not gonna, you could shim it here.
Well, really, like a compressor is
Yeah.
60 feet, 55, 60 feet. Yeah, you could shim it here, like, because you're not going to use a ton of shim.
But like a generator or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a generator or a transformer that you're concentrated that load, like the transformers are only 25
Yeah.
feet long. Yeah, then you'd shim it there.
No, he's talking about shimming it here, driving to Calgary, but have those center axles pinned up. You still have your rainbow shim.
Yeah.
that you're talking about.
Yeah,
But with all the hydraulics, it's probably not that tough to shim.
no, pretty easy.
As long as the bolts come. Right?
Yeah. No, they're pretty easy to shim, really. It's just a matter, you get, for some stuff, like, I've had it where the center axles, they were actually off the ground like this much. And I had to, it took me like 10 hours to load it because it was just that gross. Like it was 400,000 pounds or for something. And it was only like 38 feet long. And it was gross, that one.
So you just have to load it and then reshim it, load it, reshim it.
And then I had to take a bunch of weight off, take a bunch of weight and then drop the one end and then shim that and then drop, like it was you kind of have to do it in sections.
So you did it while the load was on the trailer?
No, like, well, half on. I take weight, like, so I take 200,000 pounds, say,
Yeah.
so it's on stands, and then you have to shim each joint individually. It's a pain in the butt for something like that. Like, each trailer's different, like they all operate the same, so whether it's Goldhofer, Shirley, Faymanville, Nudaboom, they're all the same. They all get shimmed the same. They're all hydraulic suspension. They all work identically.
Yeah.
The only difference is the different style of pin joints and things like that. Like a Goldhofer starts with 30 mils per joint. A Shirley is 2. Just for the way that the trailers are designed, right? So a Shirley, if I want to add the same amount, I'd have 5 mil for a Goldhofer. So that'd be 35 a joint. I would add 2 here for a Shirley.
And you get your pre-camber in there, you would shim your centers, like when you shim any of the other trailers, right? You would shim your center high, so you get your pre-camber, right? He's saying if you shim everything all the same, you essentially all you did was just lift your trailer flat again, right?
No.
That's what
Well,
you're
that's
meaning.
what my mind's thinking.
No, it's with the way the trailers are designed, the way the pin joints work.
I'm not picking up if you're laying down, but I'm gonna learn.
So each pin joint kind of looks like this. So there's the pin, and then the trailer kind of goes like that, and then. So if you add more in here, it's going to spread that spread the frame apart.
Oh, so you're getting a gradual blow.
Right.
I think.
So it's so if you were just lifting it straight up, then you'd have to take that out of there actually if it was going to be flat. So essentially our flat trailer. So if that load is 100, say 100 feet long, and it's 200,000 pounds, you can just put in just a tiny little bit of shim, just like 2 mil, 1 mil, just to keep it flat. That's it. And you don't want what you don't want is that, of course. Because what you're gonna, the main thing is that won't really hurt the trailer. It's really tough to do that. But unless you get into real heavy weights. But what'll happen is your axle stroke. So each axle has a stroke of 300 millimeters, so a foot, up and down. So you run the trailer at 48 inches, ride height, at the top of the deck. And so like what I do when I'm going on the road is I'll run 48 inches on the driver's side and then 49 inches on the passenger side just for the camber of the highway. Right. Just to keep it more level, right? That's it. So that's the one thing that you're going to really want to watch is your axle stroke for when you're negative like that, because sometimes it's unavoidable. So you can run the trailer negative, you can run the trailer positive. It's just a matter of you're going to lose that axle stroke. And once you lose that axle stroke, if you bottom the cylinder out or stroke the cylinder, you lose your stability for one, two, and you can damage something. Either blow a line, scrub some tires. There's lots of different things that could happen. But I mean, I have run trailers like gross like that, and I have run trailers like that. If you're going to load something, like say you have your little trailer there, that's really side heavy. So let's say you got a building, like I'll give you an example, it's got a big exchanger on the one side. Well, you're going to put that wherever the center of gravity is going to be. So the building's like, say like this now.
You go back to your 3-point triangle to get your center of gravity on the trailer.
For front to back, side to side, you go off your gauges. Mechanical and hydraulic steering. So each wheel set is connected to a wing or a steering plate. And each one of those is connected with a tie rod. And then, so every axle from each end to the center is connected with a tie rod to each wheel set. And the angle, like there's every combination length, has different steering angles. So you have to change the tie rods into their position in the plate. There's little holes in each plate. The plate looks like kind of like this. And each one of those positions is going to increase or decrease the angle of your steering. Okay? And then that's the mechanical side, the mechanical linkage of the steering. The hydraulic linkage is at the ends on each module. There's what they call a transfer beam. Transfer beam has 2 cylinders that are hydraulically connected to the trailer. And those hydraulic connections are on both ends. They're identical on each end. And then it's mechanically tie rodded from the transfer beam to the plates. So the only hydraulic connection is at each end. And then the rest is mechanical with the tie rods. So the tie rod would be like in here, and it would go to the next plate, like that. And then it would go to the next plate. Make sense? So that's the transfer beam on each of these 6-line modules will have a transfer beam. A 4-line module will have a transfer beam, only one. So theoretically, a 6-line module is its own trailer. So you could actually make it work it will steer. but a 4-line won't because it's only got one of those transfer beams. So the trailer works because it's tie rodded to the center, to the center, to the center. That's where your steering is split, where you're steering it's counter steering. So if I'm turning this side of the trailer, if the tractor's going that way, this side of the trailer is going the opposite way, exactly the opposite. Because it's sending oil from this cylinder over to this cylinder, and this one to that one.
You said you can run it in the 6 line, right?
You can run a 6-line as its own trailer because it has 2 transfer beams.
Because you'd have to have 2 modules pinned together, correct?
No, you could put a header on a 6-line and run it as a 6-line.
But the 4-line has to be in the middle.
But the 4-line and 2-line have to be, well, they don't have to be in the middle, they could be on the end.
Okay.
But they need another trailer to work. Like, in order for me to make it, like, let's say a 2-line. It's only got the 1 transfer beam. So I need another transfer beam so that both ends of the trailer steer opposite. So I'll add a spacer deck and another 2-line. And now it's essentially a 6-line because with the lengthwise. But now it's got 2 transfer beams, so now this trailer is turning left, this trailer is turning right.
So like on our setup with those 4-line in the middle, or that 4-line mod,
Mm-hmm.
it has a transfer beam in there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't
Unless
notice
they took
that.
it out,
I didn't notice that.
you can take them out. But no, every 2-line will have a transfer beam. Every 4 will have a transfer beam, and every 6 will have 2.
So on our 6 lines, we got one at each.
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then you just bypass them.
You just bypass the ones that
Yeah.
you're not using.
So yeah, so say that's a 6-line module. It's got a transfer beam there, and it's got one there,
If you know there's a
and there's one there,
beam
and there's one there.
way
And these are just bypassed. These center ones, we're not using those
Okay.
because I can turn that module either direction,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
that makes sense. I just,
so the front can be the back, and the back can be the front.
so you
that's
just
what's nice
bypass-
about these
we
things.
haven't bypassed right now 'cause we're not using
Yeah,
it.
yeah. The
Okay.
tie. That's why you have those tie rods, like those long ones that just
Yeah.
bypass.
Okay, right on.
Yeah. If you're going a long way, a long distance, another thing too. If you're going, say, you're going to Fort Mac with something, once you get to Radway, or actually no, to Grassland, you make the corner, you just lock the trailer up. So you essentially put it in rear steer, and make the back of the trailer just locked up, and then away you go. Because then you don't get that. You'll get whipping with these trailers.
When they're an automatic.
Mm-hmm. They'll whip back and forth and back and forth. It wears out the tires. So when you lock them up, you don't get that whipping. And especially with the tri-drive too, you're gonna feel this. You're gonna feel that in your ass end all the time.
So would you lock them?
And
like,
best thing to do. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, would you lock it from, say, Whitecourt to here? Even
You know, if you're going an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, then just lock it up. So on these trailers, there's 2 valves here. That's your 9 and 10, and there's 2 valves here, your 34 and 35. So the way that the steering works is your steering cylinders here off your transfer beams.
Mhm.
Your 9 and 10 control the oil flow from here to here. 34, 35 control oil front to back. So right now, if you're an automatic, these are closed.
Yeah.
So, and these are open. So it's allowing oil to flow back and forth. So whatever these cylinders are doing, these will do the exact opposite. So in rear steer or lockup, you open these. So now oil is, you're just floating oil side to side here between those 2 cylinders on the front. So all it's doing is those 2 cylinders are just sending oil back and forth on that front. So you're not hydraulically locking it. It's just floating. And then these ones, so these would be open and these would be closed. So now you're interrupting flow front to back. So now the only way you can steer the back is with the power pack.
and this is automatic or locked up? No, this is
No, this is lockup.
okay. Yeah.
So this is lockup or rear steer.
Or rear steer.
It's the same thing.
Right, same.
So I always think of it, down and out is automatic, in and up is rear steer, right? So all your valving on the trailer, pretty much, if the valve is out or up, it's open. Out from the center of the trailer. So if it's out or up, it's open. If it's in or down, it's closed. But you can always tell just by following the line. If the line's like this, the valve's like that, pretty simple. So, but each module will have those same steering valves. So there's a 9 and 10 here, there's a 9 and 10 on this one, and there's a 34, 35 on each, on both. They all have the same valving. So, the reason why you use the 9, 10 here and the 34, 35 here is that it makes you walk around the trailer and look at stuff.
Yeah.
Because I could use the 34, 35 right there too. You're just interrupting flow front to back, right? But because I use these ones, it's forcing me to go around the trailer and look at stuff.
So what did you do with the other valves that you're not using?
Those, they're always closed or,
They're always closed,
yeah,
ones
yeah,
you're not using are
yeah,
always closed.
yeah. Same with your suspension. You're always checking those valves all the time. Somebody could sabotage your shit on the side of the highway, close one of your valves, now you're point loaded, right?
So if you, not that it should ever happen, but you dolly off at a fucking rest stop and some kids come over there and open up valves, you could essentially come over and see your trailer laying on the side.
Theoretically,
Well, I guess you drop it, right?
well, it depends. Okay, so this is, I think I talked to somebody about, Miles about it. So there's one valve in the trailer for side-to-side support, and that's your 11 valve. That's the most important valve in the trailer. You only ever have one of those open at any time, ever. If anything, you want, if they're all closed, you're in 4-point. If with one of them open, you're in 3. With 2 of them open, you're in 2-point. Right. That's when your trailer goes over, is you're in 2-point. So that's the most important valve. But so if you park for you dolly off to go get fuel, wintertime when it's like this, I don't drop my trailer. I don't drop the suspension. I lock the axles. So I'll take each one of those axles has a valve, but the one I was talking to you about with the 2-way block in it, you just close those valves. So they'd have to open up all those valves for that thing to even do anything, right? And it's not going to fail that many valves. So I just lock the valves, and you don't have to lock all of them either. Like I'll just lock maybe 6, right?
Depending on the load, right?
Yeah, and the reason why I don't drop it in the wintertime, in the summer I'll drop it. In the wintertime I don't.
Expansion.
Pardon?
Because of expansion?
No, because of oil, slush and ice. So when you drop that trailer, it's all full of ice in there. Drop it down, you start ripping off air lines.
Oh, yeah, hydraulic lines, all kinds of
Yeah.
shit.
Unless you want to spend hours cleaning out that trailer every day, because it's a nightmare. The one thing to do when you do park though, is clean off your steering valves of ice and snow every time you park, because you never know when you might need those. But everything else, it's not really necessary for going up and down the highway, but the steering valves are like
Now you're talking about the ones right at the back?
No, the ones on the front, the 9, 10 and the 34, 35.
Yeah.
So when you park, you clean those valves.
Okay.
But everything else you don't really have to worry about because you're not going to really use it. So then your 9, 10, 34, 35. So say you want to go to steer it, right? So you'd open your 9, 10, close your close your 34, 35, and then your power pack. Your power pack looks like this. There's 4 gauges. There's 4 lockouts for suspension. All that is just so that nobody can, because there's going to be 4 valves. I can't remember if they're up here or there. There's 4 valves to raise and lower your suspension.
So 9 and 10, you open for steering. 9 and 10 are open. 34, 35 are closed.
For
right?
rear steer.
We're gonna get him to look at that 3 or 4 page manual we got, and then we'll give you guys copies of that.
Yeah.
So you don't have.
So there's 4 valves for your suspension on the power pack, and there's 2 lockouts for steering, and then there's 1 handle here for steering. Okay, so to rear steer, you have to open the 910, close the 34, 35, and then open these 2 lockouts, and then you can steer with the back end. Automatic, you line up the back of the trailer, you line up the tires straight, you line up the front, and there's a tab on the header here So if you're looking at the header from the tractor, it's got little tabs right here. You just line up those tabs. I'll show you guys. It's a lot easier when you can actually physically see it.
Tabs and then you lock it in or whatever.
Then you'd lock it, yeah. And then you'd also close your lockouts for your steering. And then we'll go to suspension quick. So on your power pack is your suspension gauges. And the reason why there's 4 is because you can make a 4-zone trailer. You can make a 4-point trailer, a 4-legged stool. So the way the trailers are set up right now, this one here would be left, right. That one, that would be right, and this would be center. So it'd be left, right, and this would be center, or front. The sloshed end. So this end would be sloshed. So it'd be left, right, front.
So those front ones gotta be the same
Mm-hmm.
pressure.
They might be a little different, depends the gauges, but they should be close to the same. So when you're loading, you'd look at your gauges and you'd want no more than 15 bar front to back difference in weight, like pressure, and no more than 15 side to side, at the very most 15. The front to back you can get away with a little bit more, side to side you don't want to do that. You try to get it within 5 bar actually is what you want.
That's ideal.
Ideal is 5 bar. And so to raise and lower your suspension, you'd open your lockouts at the top, and that's just a safety feature, so that if somebody touches your valving, it doesn't dump the trailer. Then you use these valves here to raise and lower. So these two would be left and right, these two would be front. The 2 outsides would be the front, the 2 centers would be left and right.
So if you're 4-point, the 2 outsides would be your front, left, and right.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in transport mode, are all those top 4 valves, are they closed?
Mm-hmm. Because that's your suspension. Yeah, and same with steering too. Like, I mean, you can leave them open, but if you're parked or something like that, you want to make sure those are closed.
The top 4 valves.
Well, it could theoretically, but it's more if somebody goes over there and, hey buddy, leans on it, and then all of a sudden, the thing starts going over. Okay, so a normal wheeler, right? You're gonna go, say you're making a left. So a normal wheeler, you're over here, your 40-wheeler, say a 40-wheeler, and you come over, right? Yeah. Say you're running a hammock trailer. Depends on the style, but say you're running a rear steer hammock, you might go like that, kind of, right? How it depends on how your dolly's gonna follow. These ones, it's all about tail swing. Remember, the back of the trailer is going to do exactly what the front does. So if you're driving and you're going across like that, the trailer is going to go that way, and it's going to go that way, and split in the middle. So if you say, for instance, you're too far over here to this right-hand side, and there's a pole here, you're going to take out the pole. So what you want to be is more to the center of the road. You want to go out and you want to start your corner early, so your tail swing is going to be over here.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to go straight. So you're going to turn just a bit, 30 degrees or something, a little bit, and then turn. And go right to the edge and then back like that. So what that's going to do is it's going to keep your tail swing away from that inside of the inside of the corner, or outside on this corner.
So how much, well, I guess there's no way of saying how much tail swing there is.
No, it's it depends on the turning angle.
Yeah.
You wanna trust your pilot in the back.
Yeah, and like, when I follow, I say, okay, your tail swing's good, or you got 3 feet, or you're coming close, or whatever. I'll let you know. Like if I was following, I bet you got lots of room on your tail swing, blah blah, right?
So if you don't have enough room on your tail string, you wanna straighten out for a little bit and then
Yep.
start
Yeah.
carving it.
Yep. So like I said, you do kind of what I call a double fishhook corner.
Right.
So you just a 30 degree. You start 30 degrees, and then you go all the way almost to the end of the apex, and then turn, and then your tail swing's out here instead of here.
Okay, now switch us over to a small lease road.
Then it's a little
Then
different.
you're self-steering. Yeah. You're not
Right.
auto steer now.
Well, and these things they're limited when it comes to that. Then you get into like the smaller like logging roads and shit like that. You might have to manually steer it. So the guy behind steers it. So one rule of thumb is though, you're backing around something, like say you're backing around, you almost always will be doing it with somebody steering you. But if you're not, just push that front of the trailer, we'll push that back of the trailer this way, right?
Yeah.
Just remember, whatever the front's doing, the back's doing the exact opposite.
It's essentially back in a Jeep.
Well, double Jeep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got experience with that too. Eh?
Not very good experience.
Yeah, it wasn't a good experience at all.
You gotta be careful how hard you carve it too, because you'll bend them tow
Yeah.
bars, right?
Yeah, the
Forward
bending
or
the tow
backwards.
bars.
Well, last time Ryan was here, the reference you made, and it actually made sense in my brain, is the 2x4 on your shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah, so imagine, you're holding a 2x4 on your shoulder, an 8-foot 2x4, and now you try and get it through the house without hitting anything. But that's the way it works, is that it pivots right in the center is where your steering pivots. So like if you're making a corner, say we're going to load, you gotta get over into the yard here. You'd come up here in the left lane, I'd be blocking the right lane with my pilot truck. You come up here, and then you make your left, and you wouldn't have to worry about that tail swing. Right? If you're making the right corner, kind of the same thing. You come in the center, and then you're just worried about your tail swing going into oncoming traffic. That's all.
So you put it at the back.
Yeah. So the way that the reason why I like the back, having the single point, the slosh in the back, is that if you're turning a corner, let's say it's a 12 line. The tractor and the front half of the trailer will never leave the road. But the back might go into the ditch. The tractor's never going to go in the ditch unless he does something fucked up. But the back might go in the ditch. Well, with the front still on the road, having that slosh at the back, I still have my side support on the road.
Still has stability on it.
I still have stability. Because the slosh, I'm not as much worried about it. So if it goes off and I lose stability, I lose that slosh, I still have side support. But I mean, you don't want to do it, but I mean, I have done it.
So on a 12 line, when your ass end's gonna swing into the ditch or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
when do you stop and how many axles are you comfortable with going in there?
Well, it depends on the weight and depends how deep it is. Like if they're going to stroke right out, or if they're not going to stroke all the way out, then it's all just what you're comfortable with, really, and the weights you got. Like I've put like 4 lines in the ditch, but it wasn't super heavy, and it's all situational.
And it wasn't a steep ditch or nothing.
Right.
Right, but so like on a 48 wheeler, you're okay putting the tractor in the ditch as long as the loader's on the road.
Yeah.
But here we don't.
This was opposite.
See, and then here, like if you're doing a tight corner, like say this is a lease, and you got to make this, you got to make that with a 12 line. You got to be worried about those center axles.
Side, yeah.
So center axles are going to be the ones that are, because I'll be steering it, right? I'll be steering the ass end. So now it's going to be these center axles that get stroked out into the ditch.
So like in that regard, where would the tractor start? Same kind of deal, like the fishhook idea? Or?
Yeah, well that actually you'd make it as big as you can, because you're going into such a narrow
Yeah,
spot.
Right.
You'd make this as big as you can, because I'm going to steer this end and I'm going to keep it on the road, right? And then you're steering, is okay. So the way the trailers work is the equal steering, right? So the front steer, it should be exactly what the back does, or the back will be exactly what the front does, except in rear steer. So now, if I'm not matching the angle that he's doing, it's gonna be tougher to pull. It's like dragging a sledge, right? So because the back of the trailer is going this direction and the front's got a way more of an angle, it's gonna be like dragging it sideways.
Right.
So you just got to keep that in mind when you're doing it. If you're manually steering it, the optimal way to do it is to match the angle in the front as much as you can, just so that it's easier on the truck.
Yeah.
And it's easier on the whole situation. But then you don't.
Mostly bend the
But then you
motor
won't.
and stuff.
No, you won't bend it, but you might spin out.
You bend the bars when you turn the truck too hard off the
Yeah, like the way you'll bend the bar is just turning too hard or too much, like too much of an angle. And then like with those indicators in the front, that's why I want to paint those yellow so you guys can see them a whole lot easier. Because once you get past that indicator, it's almost like that. Those bars, they're not made for any side load. They're only for straight load.
So when you're pulling these, you're not gonna double stab a corner or nothing, because that's when you'll bend your bar.
You can, well, no, there's always instances where you're going to do stuff like that. It's all situational.
Be my-
But I'd be up there watching. Okay, start chasing your bar the other way, blah blah, right?
Right.
So, and then for something like this, unhook your push truck. This push truck will go in the ditch. Then I'd actually unhook them, put them around the front with a tow
Yeah.
rope, something like that. So the steering with these trailers, I'm pretty sure this model is 55 degrees steering angle is the max with this model.
So, are you gonna talk about how you pre-job with the rope, or,
Sorry?
like how you might pre-job that?
Do a road study.
Yeah, but with the rope?
Oh, the cord length,
Yeah.
doing a cord, yeah, yeah. So, oh, we'll do our corner again. So you can actually take 110 foot long, because the trailer is 110 feet long, minus the truck and the drawbar. But take a 110 foot rope between two people, and you can hold it. That's where the center of the trailer is going to be. So you can kind of figure out with two guys, you can figure out if you can make that corner or not, without having to unhook, without having to pull. Like with these trailers, I could full steer the trailer from the back, without the tractor doing anything, just forward and back momentum. And I leave it in automatic, and I turn the 19 valve, and there's 2 pins in the header. I pop those pins out, and now that header's it's not going to do anything to the steering at all. Does everybody get that? I know Miles gets it because he had to do it.
I had to get those pins out.
So
If you unhook those pins, then that drawbar is not steering the front at all either?
no, like then it's totally hydraulically steered now.
You're steering front and back?
Yeah, from the power pack.
Yep, you betcha.
Yeah. Like you're in a tight plant site, something like that, where the tractor is getting bound up somewhere. Yeah. Or you need to unhook the truck and rehook them somewhere. So you unhook them, or you take those pins out, unhook them, and now you can move that bar wherever you need to.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're just using that truck as forward and back momentum. And then, so on that 12 line, that 19 valve will be back here. There's a 19 and a 20. The 19's right there. And you just flip that the other direction, and what it does is lets you fully steer the trailer in automatic. So you're steering the front and the back at the same time. So you're going to back under, you're going to load something. Let's say you're going to load a module, which we're going to do. It's on blocking. But there's another module right here. So how do you get in there? So what you can do is you cheat. You come down through here. The truck's pushing the front this way. You just miss these blocking with the back end, and then come out here at the end. So if you're steering it, you might have to go ahead and back a couple times for that, because most of the time it's the trucks having the issues, because the trucks, you got 30 feet of tractor plus your bar, and you're trying to move that front of that trailer over.
55 degrees.
Plus your 55 degrees.
In that sense, would you go full manual steer then? Where the truck is
If I had to, I mean, the less you mess with the trailer, the better you're going to end up. When the drivers get comfortable with it, it's way quicker almost for them to do it than it is to drive your pins out. Because we haven't done it yet.
55-degree thing in the drawbar.
Right, but then you can always unhook the truck, reset the truck.
Right, okay.
Like we can just unhook them, turn the bar over, turn it over, and then rehook them again.
Okay.
I mean, but this is within reason, right?
Yeah, that's
Like, a lot of times I'll be like, "There's not enough room. Just move this module out of the way, or like, or we have to move the module out of the way or whatever. So, and then we have, I think Danny mentioned it, where we might have to move, I might have to move one of these modules or this module ahead a bit or something like that. Just come in, load it, and then might have to move these piles up here to get the load centered on the trailer. So we come in, pick it up, pull ahead, drop it back down. Now the module is here. And then we back down the rest of the way just to get it centered on the
If
trailer.
something's in the way for you backing up far enough.
Yeah, if there's not enough room,
Right.
yeah, you just kind of hopscotch,
Yeah.
right? So you might have to move a couple sets. So when you're going over uneven ground, each axle is going to stroke at different rates, right? So, or a pothole or something like that. What you want to watch is any big holes. If you're going into at a high rate of speed, say 60, 70, with load on, if this axle comes down too quick, it'll lock itself out if it's working properly, because it's going to sense that pressure loss, and it's going to think it blew a line. So what'll happen is that'll lock, and now it'll point load that, and it'll start doing this, because it's not going to it's going to stick right where it was at, that axle, and you'll know because it's going to be like this. The load will lean a bit. It's not that big a deal because you just pressure the whole system, lift it right up, pressure the whole system. It should release that safety inside of that valve. And if it doesn't, then you might have to bleed the valve or something like that, which it's not that big of a deal. But you really want to watch for any big holes with load when you're loaded like that on even ground, because it will lock those out.
But if you take it slow enough, it won't rock.
No, it won't. And so your ride height is 48 inches. Your full stroke is going to be about 62 inches. Fully dropped, you're going to be 36 to 37 inches. So if anything, if you go to load something and it's at 32 inches, you can't load it. Okay? And if it's at 75 inches, you got to put blocking on the trailer, lift it, pull blocking out, drop it, pull blocking out, up and down, right? Which I've had to do many, many times. For shimming and stuff like that, kind of the same thing. You might have to shim it after you get weight on like half the load, and then drop one end, add some shim, drop the other end, add some shim. But you're getting into bigger, like heavier stuff. Or concentrated loads, like if it's only 30 feet wide and it's 200,000 pounds, or 30 feet long, then you might have to shim it with load on it. But normally you wouldn't. You'd have it shimmed already. So the end, let's say the end is at 36 inches fully dropped with just a bit of shim in it, the center might be at 40. Just with that little bit of a camber. So you run at a ride height at 48. Your axle stroke, like I said, is 300 millimeters. So 1 foot. So that means you have 1 foot of stroke up, 1 foot of stroke down at 48 inches. So problems you get into is, say you're going down the road and there's a big incline like that, but it's very drastic. Like it's not gradual. What's going to happen is the front of the trailer is going to bottom out, and the bottom of the trailer is going to bottom out the back of the trailer, and the center might stroke. So that's what you're watching for, is those transitions. Like railroad crossing, like a sharp railroad crossing, that's where you get that. Where the front one's going to bottom out and you actually drag the trailer, the frame of the trailer on the ground, you'll stop. You have to lift the trailer up. So something like that, like a the railroad crossing especially, they're probably the worst thing because they're so so immediate. So that trailer, as it's coming, it's going to bottom here and there. Then once it gets halfway through, it's going to stroke the ends and bottom the center. See what I mean? So you have to really watch. Then the operator would be leveling it or adding oil here and there to get it up and over. So you're not stroking it. One good thing for you guys to keep in mind. So when you're getting in the slushy, the worst temperatures, so like 10 degrees above zero and 10 degrees below zero, That's the worst temperature for these trailers, with any trailer really. These ones have a tendency to freeze up, like one axle or one set will freeze, one set of brakes. Because there's so multiple air valves over the whole course of the trailers. There's probably like 30 on this trailer, air valves. So you can use like brake line antifreeze. Problem is that you're sending it from here. How does it get all the way back, right? So it's kind of useless really to use brake clean or brake line antifreeze unless you can do each module. You do each one, but it's a pain in the ass. Normally, yeah, just be careful, like those plastic lines, there's a bunch of plastic lines and they melt real easy. The valving itself, it's a 3-way valve. It's called an R12 valve. And that's what sends air from your tanks to your brake when you hit the brake. So, and also from your tractor when you use your service. So those are the ones that'll freeze up, the R12s. Yeah. And then same as like a normal trailer, slam the drum. If you know if your shoes are touching, they slam the drum, they come free. That's also another reason why I don't drop the trailer in the wintertime, is slush, ice, slush, snow. If you're getting in a lot of slush and stuff like that and the temperature's fluctuating, use your brakes a lot. Like warm, get them nice and warm. Get that air flowing through the system, making sure the valves are purging properly, right? Especially before you stop. And then when you stop, same thing as with the wheeler, your tires are hot. You stop, let them cool down for 15 minutes, roll ahead for 3 feet. Same thing as you would with the wheeler. So you don't freeze, because these things are a pain in the ass when they're frozen to the ground. Like I had one just the end of October, and it was an 18 line. So a lot more tires, but it was that slushy, snowy, whatever. We parked in a gravel lot, and it sunk a half an inch. And it took 2 case farm tractors and 3 push trucks to get it out of. And that was only with 200,000 pounds on. And that was after digging holes like that deep with the trucks, with fully chained up. So they get it. Believe me, it saves a lot of hassle. So these trailers have a proportioning valve for the braking. So on the 12 line, that's the one that was in the shop. It's on the front left-hand side, right behind the second axle. And it's just a silver handle, and it's got a little diagram above it that looks kind of like this. Okay, and it's got a handle. And this is a round piece. And that's a proportioning valve. So you can have full brake, half brake, or no brakes by using that valve. The one that on the 12, I couldn't turn it, so it was like seized or something. The most you're ever going to need is half. If you turn that to full, you'll hit the windshield with the amount of braking that thing.
So you set it at half when you're traveling.
Yeah, half all the time. Like even with half, you're going to feel like this thing brakes well. Because with full, it's like now, like instant. No brakes is no brakes. So if that thing ever is indicated, there would be an indicator like that. If that is there, you got nothing. The steering is a closed loop system, so there can never be, you're not adding oil or taking oil out. You're always just adding pressure.
Okay.
So the suspension's different because it's only a single acting cylinder. So you're actually adding oil to lift it. You're adding oil into the cylinders from the tank.
Yeah.
And then you're putting the oil back in the tank, lowering it. But the steering is closed.
Pressure's up.
It's just pressure. That's it. If the steering was not like that, it's not a closed loop system, it would never be, you have air in there and stuff, and then you have dead spots.
Oh, just put fluid in and out.
Yeah. You get an air pocket inside the cylinder or something, and now the trailer's 3 feet to the one side, won't come back.
Yeah.
Then you gotta bleed the cylinders, bleed the these are your steering lockouts to be able to steer it. These are your suspension lockouts, particular unit, but these are your suspension valves to raise and lower the trailer. This is your steering valve to manually steer it.
Okay.
If not, if you want to use a remote, remote is here, further plug. Remote plugs in here. So there's a proportioning valve for your braking. So as you can see, you can get full steer, 3/4, half, quarter, and no brakes. And so you would always just leave it in half. It's your 11 valve.
Yep.
Right there.
Gotcha.
So that sends oil to the other side of the trailer. Yep. Most important one. That's your 9 valve. And then your 10 valve. So that's
20, gotcha.
So that's to go from automatic to manual steering.
Automatic's manual.
So from automatic to rear steer, you use those 2 valves and the 34, 35 on the back driver's side.
Okay.
35 here. That's 2 handles. Both handles are is essentially the 1 valve. So both handles have to be turned, and both handles of the 34 have to be turned. Right there.
Gotcha.
And that rate, so right now, with those should be open actually. With those open, the 34, 35 open, and the 9 and 10 closed on the front driver's side or front passenger side, then it's in rear steer.
Okay.
So those should open those.
So that's open position right there. Yep. Same as any other ball valve.
Yeah. Yep. So now it's in rear steer. A little tab there. You want to line that up with the frame.
Oh, gotcha.
It might be out just a touch. You might have to adjust it just by a little bit here and there. And that'll give you a really good indication of how to be straight. The back end. The front end you line up on the actual header. Actually, it's deadly. Actually, I can put it in automatic now.
Oh, you can?
So we line up this tab straight.
Okay, nice and straight.
Yeah. We double checked look down the tire. Make sure the tire's straight. And it's pretty close. So now I can close my valve.
10.
So I'm gonna close my 10. Close my 9. Then I'm gonna go to the back. So now I'm going to allow oil to travel front to back, so the front will steer the back. That's your 35. That's both valves here.
Okay. Open.
And both valves here at the 34. Open.
Okay. And then reverse to put it in the rear steer.
That's correct.
Okay.
So now by closing the 9 and 10, it's not isolating that system anymore. It's sending oil now from the front to the back through the 35 and 34. So the back will steer exactly what the front does.
And that's without, you don't need any power in the back. You're
Nope.
good to go.
Good to go.
Rear steer, you need the power block.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I was going to go back into rear steer, I would open these 2 valves, or sorry, close these,
yeah.
close the 34, 35. So you're isolating oil from the front to the back, and then open the 9 and 10 so that it's floating that front system that the truck is in control of, so it's not going to blow a line.
Okay, perfect.
And then you can steer just the back.
Perfect.